Hey everyone. So in this video, I'm going to go over doing some data science with some F# here. And to do that, I'm going to use a package called FsLab. And as you can see here, it's a collection of data science packages for F#. And that includes a few things here. First, we have some data access with F#.data, access JSON, CSV files, and all that, using type providers, which gives you auto-completion based on samples. Includes DDL, which is data frame package. You got an R interop, so you can use R within F#. Math.NET numerics for linear algebra and other math applications. A couple of plotting packages. Literate F#, which is similar to R Markdown to create HTML or PDF reports. And some support for Jupyter notebooks. What we're going to go over here is first how to install and use this, but some DDL operations here, a little bit of math.NET numerics, and a little bit of charting. The R interop, I'm going to save that for another video. And so let's get started. The easiest thing to get FsLab is to use a .NET template. So that's what we'll be doing. And so in my terminal here, I just call .NET new-I to install, and the name of the template, which is FsLab.templates. There we go. And we can go up here. We have this FsLab journal template that we can use. So that's what we'll do. We'll create a new project using that template, using .NET new, using the FsLab journal template. Give it the language of F#, and give it the name of the project that we want to do. So right here, we'll just do FsLab crash course. And now we can go into the directory that it created for us, and I'm going to use VS Code for this. There we go. Since we're using Visual Studio Code, it has good support for F#. And so our extensions here, the one I highly recommend is Ionide for F#. And if you didn't have this installed, when you open this in Visual Studio Code, it might automatically install it, but this is highly recommended for F# and Visual Studio Code. And we have this F# crash course FSX file. FSX is a F# script file, and we have a FS file is usually what's compiled, but script files aren't compiled. And this is just some sample here that you can use. I'm just going to delete all of it. First thing to do when we work with FsLab is we need to load another script. And we go packages, FsLab, and FsLab.fsx. And to run this in Visual Studio Code, I can bring up my control panel, and FSI, which is F# interactive, we can send a file or send a selection. I'll send a selection. So it loaded everything, and I'm going to move this to the right so we can see everything a bit better. That loaded, and by the way, what this does is just loads all the DLLs that we need. So the first thing we'll do is we'll open DDL, and I'll run that using Alt-Enter to send to the F# interactive. Alright, so the first thing here, let's load some data, and I'll be using this bank customer marketing data. And to do that, we'll do frame. And notice one thing, how we get some nice and fast autocomplete here. So frame.read CSV, and I'm going to pass in a bank data set here. And we get this kind of a warning here. Method is not intended to use from F#. That's based off the parameters that we're passing, the optional parameters. First, we can give it has headers equals true. Now for F#, we did an equals here for our named parameters. In C# it will be a colon. It's true, and it also has a separators parameter, and we can pass in the semicolon there, which is similar to what you would find in ML.NET when you load in the file. And that file is up one. Let's do that. There we go. So loaded in our file correctly there. And this warning is by the indentation. F# has some rules on indentation, but that's okay in this case. We have our data here that can get some columns here, like the age column. We can use the bank data frame that we created. We can call get column, and we know it's an integer, and pass in the name of the column, and then we'll print it out. So we'll send that. Okay, so we got that age column here, and see here it comes in as a series of an integer and an integer. The first integer is the index, the second integer is the type of the values. Along with the get column, if we're not sure if a column exists, we can call the try get column and say we expect it to be a string, and we just give it a bogus column name here. This takes in another parameter called lookup, so lookup, and we'll say exact, and we'll print that out here. And as you see in our output, we get an optional value. And if we look at our autocomplete, it has value and a value, so it's like a nullable type that it gave us. Another way to get the column is we can use something similar to pandas, how you can take your data frame and in brackets put the name of the column that you want, but that doesn't exactly work in F#. To do that, we need to put a dot between the name of our variable and the brackets, and we can print that out. There we go, we got that same column. Now if you want to get a specific value from an index, we can call the get method and say we want the first or the second item because it is 0 based. There we go, that's 33. We come up here and index 1 is 33. And similar to the try get column, we can do the try get. So if there's an index that's way out of bounds, we'll get that optional value again, and has value will be false. And this has a couple of things, and we can get all the observations by calling the observations method on it. It returns a sequence of key value pairs. The key is going to be the index and then the value. Now another way you can run this, and you'll see this often in F#, is using pipes. We'll use this notation as the pipe, and then we can run this series.observations. So what this is saying is, instead of calling the observations property, we just take our series object here, and then we pipe that as input into the series.observations method. We get another sequence here of integers and float. Up here it was just the key value pair sequence of integer and float. And instead of observations, we can also call observations all, so this will get missing values as well. And we see here these are float as an option, so we get sum and then the value here, which will allow you to do some pattern matching in case some values are missing. Now there's actually an easier way to get a column instead of calling this with the brackets and all that, is we can call our data frame and use the question mark operator and then the name of the column that we want. There we go. And this is similar to what you can do in R. We get back the series of a column. So next let's do some statistics here. And to do that, we have a stats type that we can use, and that has several methods on it. So we can do the mean, and we can pass in our data frame, and it gives us mean values for all the numerical columns. For all the string columns, it just says missing. And we can call the mean on a series as well instead of a data frame like above. We can use a bank question mark age, and we get that same 41 that we did up here. Now there's no describe method on here, which I like to use in pandas or the data frame API, but we can easily create our own with the function. Create a function in F#, just do let, then the function name, which I'll say describe, and whatever parameters, it's going to take in a frame, and it's going to send back a series, and this is a method. I'm giving values here of a sequence, and I'm going to do some key value pairs here. So first will be the mean, and I'm going to set that using the equal to greater than operator. That's going to be stats.mean on the frame. We get an error here. Just not sure what the frame is. So up here we can specify, put the frame in parentheses and then the colon, and then we can specify what type this frame is supposed to be. So it's a frame and it's generic and has two generic items here. And to do generic in F#, you do a single quote and then kind of a random letter that you want to use. I'll use R, capital R for row, and then C for column, and now this error goes away. And then we can continue with median, status that median with the frame, min, do max, and then we'll do standard deviation. There we go, so there's our method, and we can call our method, so describe, and then pass in our bank dataset. And F#, you don't necessarily have to put parentheses for your parameters and methods. So let's run this. There we go, so we get our mean, median, min, missing, and it's a series, and it has a different columns in there for, so the max age is 87, the min is 19, and so on. Next, let's look at some math.NET numerics, just a little bit. Now for this, we need to load another F# script, similar to what we did up here with the FsLab script. So in here, it'll be packages, and math.net.numerics.F# to mathnet.numerics.fsx. There we go, so it loads all those for us, and we'll open up mathnet numerics and mathnet numerics linear algebra. Alright, so with that, we have interesting stuff, something like special functions, all sorts of mathematical functions. I don't even know what most of these do. I do know what a factorial is though. And factorial, if you haven't heard of it before, it is whatever number that we pass in, such as 1 factorial. It will be 1 times 1, which will be 1. If it's 2, it'll be 2 times 1, which is 2. And if it's 5, it'll be 5 times 4 times 3 times 2 times 1. So whatever number factorial that you do, it just multiplies that number and all the numbers below it. And since we're dealing with linear algebra, we can mess with matrices here. So we create a matrix, and it has this matrix method that we can use. Let's see, 1 and 2, then another 3 and 4. And let's print this out. There you go, so we have a metric, and it does a nice pretty print of it for us. And we can do some math on our matrix. Get the inverse of our matrix by piping in our matrix to matrix.inverse. And run this, so get the inverse of the matrix up here. And we can do regular mathematical notations on our matrices here. So our original matrix times the inverse, and this should give us our identity matrix, which is pretty close here. We got 1 here in our little diagonal, and 0 and very close to 0 there. Alright, so now for some data frame operations using Deedle. First, we can do some filtering. So we can call bank filter, not fill missing, but filter rows by, and we give it a column. So I do age, and on filter age, were they equal to 30? Yeah, so all of our ages are 30 here. And similarly, we can pipe in that data frame into a frame.filter rows by age and 30. We get the same output. And by the way, we can chain as many pipes as we want to here. So I can also call frame.take on here, and I take the first 5 items. So next we'll do some grouping of our data. We can do group rows by, and this is generic, so our column is going to be a string, and we give it the marital column. I guess we've got married, divorced, single is in there in the middle there. And we can also pipe frame.group rows, and let's say using, and then here we can pass in a function on how to group our rows, and it's using a lambda. So do fun, I would say k and then row, that goes to let's see, row get as, it's going to be a boolean default. So we're going to group based on the default row. So run that, and the default is here, so false is first. Then we got our trues down here. We can also use methods such as frame that group rows by string instead of using this get generic method here. So I group the job rows, and then I can tag on another frame that group rows by boolean, pass in that lone column. So by job, let's see, got unemployed, and then by lone is false. Then down here, secondary and true. Next, we can deal with missing values and DDL here. So we can pipe in frame.fill missing with and give it a default value such as 0. I don't think there's any missing values in this data set, so there's nothing to show. We can do something similar to column themselves using the question operator. So the age column, we can pipe that into series.fill missing, and we can give it a direction on how to fill, direction that backwards, so it takes from previous item and fills that as the missing row. And we can also drop missing rows in that column. For a more advanced way of filling in missing values, we can call fill missing with fill missing using, and that takes in a lambda. We get the current missing value as the parameter here. So we can use that value to get the previous value using the try_get method, pass in that current value that's missing, and use the lookup exact or smaller, and then we can get the next value from there using a similar way, but using lookup exact or greater. So it gives us the previous value from where this value is, and then the next value. And then here we can do pattern matching on the previous and the next value, and then we give it some patterns to match on. And because it's try_get, it's an optional value, so we can match on optional value if it's present. Then we get a variable p for this previous, and then similar optional value present n for the next item. So if we have both items present, we can fill the current missing value. For this case, we just say p plus n to fill in that missing value with the summation of the previous and the next value. And you notice here we get a warning here in F#, incomplete pattern matches on this expression, so it knows there are some patterns that we haven't matched yet. And so another pattern is if we have previous value but no next value, and we can use the underscore to represent anything, and in this case, since we're already handling to represent anything, and we can do another one where if we don't get our previous value but we have our next value, we just give those values, and I'll change those to just v. So we have v here. Either one of these patterns will produce just that current value. And then last, if neither of them have a value, we just give it a default of 0. Alright, so next we'll look at a little bit of charting here. And with that, we'll open xplot plotly, and we can do stuff like chart.bar. We can pass in our age column. It's going to open a new tab here, Here's our bar chart. There's kind of a lot going on here. We can customize a little bit using a layout. So a new layout, and I'll give a title, age, and I can say show legend equals false. And then using that same chart.bar on our age column, I can pipe that into chart.width layout and pass in that layout. There we go. So we get that age title there. And we can do scatter plots using the bank.age, but we get an error here saying there's no overload that recognizes the series type, so we can pipe that into series.to vector to get it into the way that it wants. There we go. Now we have a scattered plot of our ages. Alright, so that's kind of a quick crash course on how to install and start using FsLab for any of your data science needs. F# really is a good language for this type of stuff. Hopefully it starts getting used more and more. And I plan on doing more videos with it myself. I'll end things there. I hope you enjoyed the video, and thanks for watching.